The morning sun shimmered across the calm waters of my ranch lake, the ripples glistening like shards of glass as the breeze swept through the valley. It was the perfect day for me and my family to finally take a break from the chaos of everyday life and camp right here on our own land. The lake had belonged to my family for 3 generations, a place where my grandfather taught my father to fish and where I had first learned to swim as a boy. Now, after years of hard work and finally paying off the mortgage, I wanted to enjoy the freedom of sitting by the water, sipping coffee, and watching the sun rise from my own shoreline. I pitched a tent, set out the picnic table, and arranged food, proud of the peace I had carved out for myself in a world that never seemed to slow down. But little did I know that this calm morning was about to be shattered by a storm in human form, a storm named Karen, the self-appointed HOA president, who believed she owned more than just her house across the ridge. It began with the crunch of tires on gravel and the sharp slam of a car door. I looked up from buttering a piece of bread to see a woman in a pale pink suit stomping toward me like a general charging the battlefield. Her voice cut through the air before she was even close. "You can't camp here," she barked, pointing her manicured finger toward the ground beneath my chair. "This is private property, and I won't allow you to ruin the community's shoreline with your trashy setup." I blinked at her, stunned, then slowly set down my plate. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "this is my property. I own the land and the lake, you can check the county records yourself. You don't have any say here." But Karen wasn't interested in records or facts. Her face twisted into fury, and she shrieked, "I own the shore." Her declaration echoed off the water, startling a flock of birds into the sky. My family exchanged uneasy glances, but I stayed calm. I'd dealt with people like her before, loud, entitled, convinced the world revolved around them. What I didn't expect was her next move. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. Within 20 minutes, the sound of sirens pierced the tranquility, and soon enough 4 uniformed officers arrived, stepping out with grim faces as if they were responding to a serious emergency. Karen rushed to them dramatically, waving her arms and pointing at me like she was unveiling a villain. "That man is trespassing," she cried. "He's camped illegally on our lake, destroying property value, and violating HOA rules." The officers exchanged glances, then looked over at me. I rose slowly, brushing crumbs from my jeans, and greeted them politely. "Officers," I said, "thank you for coming. But I believe there's been a mistake. This is my ranch, my lake, and my land. I have the deed inside my cabin just up the hill if you'd like to see it." The lead officer frowned and glanced at Karen, who was already puffing herself up like a queen waiting for a crown. "Don't listen to him," she snapped. "We voted last year that the lake belongs to the community. He's lying." At that, I couldn't help but laugh, not out of disrespect, but out of sheer disbelief. "You voted," I repeated. "Lady, you can't vote away private property." The officers' expressions began to shift, the tension in their stances loosening as they realized something wasn't right. The truth began unraveling when one of the younger officers asked a simple question: "Ma'am, can you show us proof of your HOA's ownership of this lake?" Karen froze, her lips twitching. "Well, everyone knows, everyone in the neighborhood agrees, it's always been ours," she stammered. The officer shook his head. "That's not how ownership works. Either you have legal documentation, or you don't." I offered to walk them up to the cabin where the original deed was framed, signed by the county clerk decades ago. Karen, still unwilling to admit defeat, stomped her heel into the grass. "He forged it," she accused, her voice cracking with desperation. But the more she shouted, the more foolish she looked. When we returned with the deed, stamped and notarized, the lead officer's patience ran thin. "Ma'am, this man owns the lake and the surrounding land," he said firmly. "You're the one trespassing here." Her eyes widened, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, before she spat, "No. I'm the HOA president. I can be anywhere I want." The officers exchanged looks again, this time with clear irritation. By then, a small crowd had gathered, neighbors curious about the flashing lights and raised voices. Whispers rippled through them as they watched Karen unravel, realizing the truth she had hidden from them for years. Many of them hadn't known the lake wasn't community-owned, that their HOA fees didn't grant them access to the water. Some were visibly angry, muttering about how she had lied and manipulated them. I stood tall, calm and collected, holding the deed like a shield of truth. "I don't mind sharing the beauty of this place," I told the crowd, my voice carrying over the water. "But lies and bullying won't be tolerated. This is my family's land, and you all deserve to know the truth." The officers turned back to Karen, now trembling with rage and embarrassment, and told her to leave immediately before she faced charges of trespassing and filing a false report. She sputtered, cursed under her breath, and stormed back to her car, the tires screeching as she sped off. As the dust settled and the officers assured me I had every right to camp by my lake, my family finally relaxed. The neighbors, one by one, approached to apologize and thank me for standing my ground. And though Karen's echoing words, "I own the shore," still rang in the back of my mind, I couldn't help but smile. Because the truth had won, and for the first time in years, my ranch lake was finally mine again, free from her lies. For weeks after the incident at the lake, things seemed strangely quiet. Karen kept her distance, though I noticed her pink sedan driving slowly past my ranch gate more often than before. Neighbors whispered that she was plotting something, that humiliation had only fueled her determination to reassert control. I wasn't surprised, people like her never surrendered gracefully. Sure enough, her revenge came in the form of a barrage of letters, threatening fines from the HOA, notices of alleged violations, even claims that my campfire smoke had lowered property values. I laughed at first, tossing them into the fire pit as kindling, but eventually, one arrived stamped with legal letterhead. She had filed a lawsuit, claiming community ownership rights over my lake. I knew it was baseless, but it still meant time, money, and stress. My wife urged me to fight back, not just for us but for everyone Karen had bullied into silence. So I called my lawyer, dug up every scrap of documentation proving the ranch had been in my family long before the HOA even existed, and prepared for the storm. Court day was a spectacle. Karen strutted into the courthouse in another pastel suit, her entourage of HOA board members trailing nervously behind. The gallery was packed with neighbors, curious to see whether her delusions could stand up against the law. She opened her case with the same dramatic flair she'd shown by the lake, shouting about her shore, accusing me of theft, and waving papers that turned out to be nothing more than neighborhood newsletters. When my turn came, I walked calmly to the stand and laid out the original deed, the tax records, the county maps, all indisputable. My lawyer spoke clearly and methodically, dismantling every one of Karen's claims until the judge finally leaned forward, rubbing his temples. "Ma'am," he said sternly, "this man owns the property outright. Your HOA has no authority here. This case is dismissed." The gavel came down like thunder. Karen's face drained of color, her lips quivering as murmurs of satisfaction filled the room. For once, the queen had no crown to cling to. But the true twist came when the county officials, who had been following the case, opened an investigation into the HOA's finances. It turned out Karen had been misusing funds for years, charging residents inflated maintenance fees, while funneling the extra money into her personal accounts. She had even used HOA money to renovate her own home, disguising it as community improvement. The news spread like wildfire, neighbors furious at how they had been deceived. Within days, a petition circulated to remove her from her position. When the vote finally came, it was unanimous. Karen was ousted, disgraced, and left facing not just angry neighbors but also possible criminal charges for fraud. I didn't celebrate her downfall with glee, I simply felt relief. At last, the community could breathe without the chokehold of her entitlement. The lake became a symbol of freedom after that. Families who once avoided it now came down to fish, swim, and picnic, with my blessing. I put up a sign reading, "Welcome to Echo Lake, respect it, share it, love it," making it clear that kindness, not control, was the law here. Neighbors thanked me for standing my ground, some even admitting they had been too afraid to speak up against Karen for years. One elderly couple told me they had nearly sold their home because of her constant harassment, but now they finally felt peace again. Sitting by the water in the evenings, watching the sun sink behind the trees, I felt a sense of victory that went beyond winning a lawsuit. It wasn't about defeating Karen, it was about reclaiming the spirit of community she had poisoned. As for Karen, she vanished from the neighborhood shortly after her downfall. Rumor had it she sold her house in a hurry, unable to face the people she had lied to and stolen from. The last I saw of her was one rainy morning, her pink sedan loaded with boxes, driving away without so much as a wave. Part of me pitied her, how sad it must be to believe power comes from control rather than respect. But mostly, I felt grateful. Grateful that my family's ranch lake was safe, that truth had triumphed over arrogance, and that the echoes of her shouting, "I own the shore," had finally been replaced with laughter, splashing water, and the crackle of campfires. The shore was never hers. It was ours, in the truest sense, not because of ownership papers, but because it was a place meant to be cherished, not conquered. And as I leaned back in my chair by the fire, holding a piece of that same honey-glazed ham I'd been enjoying the day she called the cops, I knew the battle was over. My lake, my peace, my freedom, they were all secure at last.